and welcome on in to the Third Round Universal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with you, along with Zach Malamud. And Zach, happy belated Halloween.
Happy belated Halloween, and Brett, happy November. Crazy that we're already into November. The year flew by.
It is absolutely nuts, and it is freezing cold here in the Northeast.
Not as cold as here.
What? Oh, that is true. That is true. The snow you sent me this morning, it was a lot of hail and snow coming down. Did you at least get some Halloween candy in there?
I did. Enjoying some Starburst and some Skittles. Those are good.
Those are right up my alley. I think my go-to is Sour Patch, and so we've been blessed with some Sour Patch in my house here.
There you go. I'm a big Reese's guy, so that's my favorite to go to.
There you go. All right, so let's get into some football here. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube wherever you get your podcast. Give us the thumbs up and get your comments in as well. You can drop a comment in. We'll end as many of them as we can. Zach, let's start out with some pretty sweet news. See the candy transition there. Some pretty sweet news there as Will Levis. He was named the starter, and he came through last week. And now this week, it seems that they're going to go back to him. Ryan Tannehill officially ruled out. Will Levis named the starter. Zach, just take us through, first off, his performance from last week, but what you foresee just up here in the future.
I mean, it was crazy stuff, Brett. I just wasn't expecting Will Levis to come in and just be as successful as he was coming into that game against Atlanta. Of course, like we've been waiting for Will Levis to really get a shot. They did end up bringing in Malik Willis for some plays, and very early in that game, Willis ended up fumbling. And I feel like that kind of just led to, all right, we're just give it to Levis and let him just take his deep shots and let him go to work. He was awesome, Brett. He was really, really good. 65% completion percentage, 238 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And this is in an offense where they are so run heavy that 238 yards is a lot for a quarterback. Like, that's a perfect amount. The 4 touchdowns, D-Hop had 4 catches, 3 of them were touchdowns. What a game for him. Like, we'll get to him a little bit after, but right now for Levis, like, the sky's the limit right now. Like, after this week, you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to be unbelievable. Yes, that can change any second now. I need to see a little bit more from him, probably a couple more games, but if he does similar to what he did here, he's automatically playing in week 9 now. If he automatically does that, then I'm going to start to be a believer. The Steelers' defense is not great, and I think he could take a real advantage of them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it was very impressive, the stuff that we saw from him. He was getting comfortable out there. It wasn't like he was throwing these dink and dunk passes. He was throwing it down the field. And listen, you have a receiver there like DeAndre Hopkins, and he's going to go up and get the ball. He plucks it out of the air like pretty much nobody else in the league. So now we, 4 touchdowns and it's all well and good. Looking ahead now, I think that he's at least worth a roster spot in 12 to 14 team leagues. That said, I'm not exactly rolling him out in any league other than a 2 quarterback superflex league, and you're rolling him out there as your second quarterback. A lot of those second quarterbacks that are in your leagues are, ranked in the 20s, low 20s, even some of them, depending on quarterbacks you have on your roster. But I would say Will Levis certainly at least comes onto the radar. And so he's definitely worth a roster spot. Up to 14 team leagues, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's fair right now. I do think he starts to put himself on the fantasy radar, especially after a performance like that. And now he's getting game time. So like that's all you can really ask right now. The thing about him is we didn't see it in this game, but he's got legs also, Brett. He had 7 carries. It only turned into 11 yards, but that he's going to be willing to run out of the pocket, get out of the pocket, and get into space and maybe make something out of it with his legs. I think that's huge. Of course, fantasy football, the biggest thing with quarterbacks you're looking for, unless they're dropping 500 yards every game, you're looking for, can they get out of the pocket as well? and make something out of it with their legs. I think we'll see that a little bit more, especially this week when he's got guys like TJ Watt coming at him in pass rush. Like, he's got to get out of there. He can't stay in there for long. I think that's going to be a big thing for him this weekend. If he could do that, then he's very easily on the fantasy radar.
Yeah, completely. Let's just jump right into next news. And it was a bit of a, they say trick and treat. This was a bit of a trick here for Minnesota Vikings fans. Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, and it looked like a very similar play to what we saw with Aaron Rodgers, that slow-mo and you see the calf pop, and it was not good news for Kirk. He knew it pretty much immediately, jumped his way off the field on one leg. And, there was also that video that I saw from, I believe it was Inside the NFL a couple days ago, of him cheering his teammates on, and while he was getting on the cart. Great to see there, at least, and Kirk at least being there with the team, and obviously he's going to be going through his stuff, but his rehab and all of that. But he does live in Minnesota, so unlike Aaron Rodgers, who's been traveling across the country from California to New Jersey and back and forth, Cousins will be there in and around Minnesota and around the team. So at least they will still have that locker room leader, and they'll probably best some Creed in their locker room still. But they turn the page. They go out and they get Joshua Dobbs from the Arizona Cardinals. And for a little bit there, it was kind of curious what was being said about Joshua Dobbs, about his tape, and kind of was a lot of lying from Arizona staff. And because, listen, I think Joshua Dobbs has proven he could be a capable quarterback in this league. I think this, quite simple, it's good news for the guys around him, the Hawkinsons, add Jordan Addison. It's even good news for the running game, I think, where, if Jaron Hall, who will be starting this week, but probably not for the rest of the weeks, I think that, a lot of it was like, oh, wait, is this going to be Cam Akers and Madison? And what does that even look like if the offense is being run through Madison and Akers compared to a Justin Jefferson who might be coming back? Totally changes the whole face. It just proves it proves the value of Kirk Cousins on your team. He changes the whole way that the offense works. Josh Dobbs coming in, though, listen, he's a rushing threat. Kevin O'Connell actually really does like rushing quarterbacks, and it was a reason why they were in on Trey Lance just a few months ago, and they all, believe it or not, they were in on Josh Dobbs before he got traded. So, listen, I think that this is nothing but good news for pretty everybody in that offense. I think that seeing Jaron Hall being the guy just a couple days ago, like, that was a little bit of a scary thought, I think, for a lot of owners of Hawkinson, Addison, Jefferson, etc.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I mean, the thing about Dobbs is it hasn't been pretty. He's just also in an offense where it's not always going to be pretty in Arizona. Like, there's not a ton there for him. Like, yes, Hollywood Brown, he kind of built that chemistry with him, but even Hollywood Brown was a lot of inconsistencies. And I think that fantasy owners of those guys need to be just a little bit prepared for that. It's not always going to be their week. I feel like Josh Dobbs is the kind of quarterback, like, there's so many mouths to feed, and they're going to try their best to really, like, give him the best opportunity, but it's not always going to pan out because he's not Kirk Cousins. He hasn't been in this offense. Like, that's going to be the one thing. There is going to be those inconsistencies. That's the one thing I'm worried about. I think when you talk about his rushing threat, he does have a solid rushing threat. I'm just looking at his stats over the last couple of games, though, like 6 carries, 7 carries, 7 carries. He's turned them into a fair amount of yards, but it's not like he's in like a Lamar role of just like always looking to run. Like, he's got to throw the ball. That's the biggest thing. Like, he had to throw the ball. Attempts were over 32 in his last 5 games. Every single game, he was over 32 attempts. So he's going to be dishing it around. They need to figure things out in this offense of who's going to end up being like his go-to guy. Because, of course, it was Jefferson for Kirk. Who's it going to be for Josh Dobbs? I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I'm actually very curious to see. And listen, they've been scheming up a lot of Jordan Addison sort short route, long route, over the middles. And so I think for the time being, he's going to be the lead guy. But at the same time, I can also see them really leaning into Hawkinson. And it kind of goes back to, listen, the beauty that is Trey McBride. And we'll get to them later in the show as we talk about Arizona. But just look at the weapons that he now has. I think that that's the beauty of what this move is, especially if you're a Josh Dobbs owner. You're going from Trey McBride, Marquise Brown, Michael Wilson, and Dale Moore. And now all of a sudden you're getting Addison, Hawkinson, potentially Jefferson, and KJ Osborne. I think that that's a fantastic suite of guys there. Obviously, James Conner went down with injury, and that didn't exactly help him. But now you have a two-headed monster also at running back, which I think protects him a bit. He's not forced to throw the ball every single time. He has those two guys there behind him that he can also dump it off to them. But he at least has that protection where they won't have to throw the ball every single time.
That's fair, and I think he'll rely on that run game a lot. He of course misses James Conner when he was down in Arizona. Like, that was a huge loss for him, especially because he had to throw the ball a lot more. So I think, having that running game is going to help him as well.
Completely. So now let's just jump over to our injury news. And, other than the Kirk Cousins here, we got one big one. It was Kendrick Bourne. He is out for the season with a torn ACL. Zach, listen, it's a big loss for a team, the New England Patriots, who really haven't had a lot going for them either way. The one bright spot over the last 3 weeks, though, it was Kendrick Bourne, scoring in double digits in fantasy each and every week. 11 targets just 2 weeks ago, went down to 7. And then, this past week, he only had 3 catches for 4 yards. But he scored a touchdown in the last 2 weeks as well. And so who is going to replace this? Is it going to be a Demario Douglas, Juju Smith-Schuster, even Ramondre?
I think Demario Douglas is in for a good one here, Brett. I think he's in for a much bigger role here. And I think they're going to rely on him as maybe that number one guy for Mac to go to. It's weird because, of course, this stinks for Kendrick Bourne. He was having a really, really good year. It started off okay, and then dropped down the 2 games against the Cowboys and the Saints, but he became Mac's number one target. He figured out how to really work in this offense, and they rode with him. I think the biggest thing about this is I think Demario Douglas, just because of there's similarities between the two of them. Of course, I think Douglas wins on speed, but Bourne is very fast, knows how to move around and was really that solid weapon. I think Demario Douglas, I feel like Juju's a weird one, though, because I just don't think he fits well in this offense. It's crazy to say how they just signed him. He does not fit in New England. I completely believe that, and I think that Douglas has a better shot of replacing what Bourne's leaving now with that injury.
Agree. Listen, he got 7 targets last week, only got 5 catches, and it was only for 25 yards. So I think we have to start to build the confidence between that. Listen, the disappointment of Juju Smith-Schuster this year, not that that's going to continue. I think they're going to try to get him a little more work, especially because now they're kind of let up a little bit. Hunter Henry, he's been very reliable. He only got 3 targets last week. That could be a potential option, but I'm kind of staying away for the most part from this entire New England offense. Mac Jones is a very, very low super flex play for me right now. Hasn't really been amazing. Obviously, there was a lot of the talking heads of people calling for him, and Malik Cunningham, they signed to a 3-year deal, and then they put him back on waivers, and now he's on the practice squad. He's waiting in the wings. Bailey Zappi obviously is the backup. I think that there's still a lot of noise there about the jury's out on Mac Jones, but I'm not sure that it's actually fair to criticize him when he's kind of with an island of misfit toys. Zeke Elliott, he's been okay, but not great. And that was the one bright spot for them. It was supposed to be was that running back tandem. The whole offense runs through them, and without their efficiency, it kind of is making it tough on Mac Jones. So all in all, I'm staying away from this entire New England offense. I won't be picking up Demario Douglas. However, he's probably worth a stash in deeper leagues right now, but it won't be me.
That's fair. I think Ramondre has been better the last couple of weeks. Yes, it was okay last week. Like, I think there's improvement coming, and I also think that they're going to rely on those two a little bit more as well now that they don't have a top weapon. I think that's going to be the big thing for New England, relying on those two most experienced players. Like they have Ramondre and Zeke in this offense. Like they can get the job done through that way. Of course, they're going to have to find a weapon to throw the ball downfield, but those guys I think are going to get a bigger workload as well. Right.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so now let's jump into our standouts, and we have to start with CeeDee Lamb, who lit it up this past week. Zach, I mean, listen, he had a rush for 12 yards, and I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Is that nice end around? And they had a Deebo Samuel type play. 12 catches, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. Zach, he was 41 points in standard PPR leagues. I mean, CeeDee Lamb kind of did what he was supposed to do. But this is kind of the first time he's done it all season, at this level at least.
100%, Brett. Yeah, he had the one game where he was over 10 catches. That was against the Jets back in week 2, but didn't have a touchdown in that game. He had 2 in this one and 12 receptions to 11 in that week 2 game. I feel like this is the breakout game for CeeDee Lamb this year. Hey, CeeDee Lamb, welcome to Fantasy Football 2023. We're waiting a little bit for him, Brett, but they finally got there. I think a lot of that has to do with some of the blowouts they were involved in. Like they are torching teams. Finally, he's gotten a game where they are blowing out somebody, but it's because of him and what he's been able to do. So I think that's huge for CD owners. I'm sure they were very happy with that performance, and rightfully so. Like he did that against a defense that's been pretty solid. Of course, their secondary is still the one problem that they have, but it's a solid defense in LA, and he made them look silly. He made them look silly this week. So huge for CD, and I think it just continues to boost his value for future weeks, Brett.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, we can't discount what Dak Prescott also did, and it was a guy that we for the last bunch of weeks here, and whether the long-term future, and there were talks about contract extension and all of that. I think that Dak silenced the haters this past weekend. 25 of 31, like that was awesome. 304 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have a pick, wasn't a bad one, wasn't on him. Added 19 yards from the ground on 4 rushes. But, I mean, it was a very calm, collected Dak Prescott, channeled in, went up against a good defense, and, kind of buried him.
Yeah, I think that's really important for CD and both Dak to have this game. And just for Dak, it's been a little bit off. Like, it's weird to say it's been a little bit off because it hasn't in like real football. It has been in fantasy football. That's the one problem right now. He's still maybe a reliable starter. They're going up against Philly this week, so that's going to be an interesting one. I'd probably stay away from him because
I agree with that. I think that the games that have been in Philadelphia have been very low scoring. I'm expecting a lower scoring game. I'm expecting also CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown to both have a touchdown catch, because they're very, very high cutters, both guys. Both demand them all. I'm expecting that at least. But I'm expecting a low scoring game. And Philly hasn't been exactly what they were last season. They're not that amazing defense. And from a fantasy perspective, I'm talking, not from a football perspective. They have a great defense. They have allowed quite a bit of points to opposing receivers, opposing tight ends. And so, there's an opening here. That said, I probably would put him in as a lower end starter this week. Yes, it is in Philly, and that is a big deal. Like I said, I'm not expecting a big shootout here. Divisional games are always low scoring with these two teams, and so I'm expecting about the same there. So Dak is a lower end starter for me. He's a certain start in a super flex, obviously. But as far as one quarterbacks go, he's probably a low end quarterback 1.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I would agree that's probably the spot to put him right now.
Yeah. All right, so now jumping over to our next standout, and Zach, this was a guy that we talked about quite a bit into the offseason, and then at the very start of the season, it seemed like he couldn't really have the opportunity to succeed. He finally gets it here, another game with David Montgomery out due to the rib injury. Jahmyr Gibbs, 26 carries, 152 yards, and a touchdown. Also caught 5 balls on 5 targets for 37 yards, finishes with just under 30 standard PPR points. Zach, just take us through Gibbs and what you think his outlook is so far or going forward.
So obviously Gibbs' outlook is unbelievable for now, but there's still a man named David Montgomery who's going to come back from injury soon, and I think this workload is going to go away. Of course, I think it's going to go back to I don't think it's going to go back to completely what it was when it was like early and Gibbs was still learning, where Montgomery got just almost all of it, and then Gibbs got a couple here and there. I think it's going to start to edge a little bit closer to maybe a split when it comes to. I don't know if that's going to be in the rushing game. I think, of course, when Montgomery's back, like they're going to rely on him to get in between the tackles. They're not going to rely on Gibbs for that too much, but he's proven that no matter the situation, no matter how many touches he gets, no matter if it's in the tackles as well as out of the backfield and receptions, like he can make something out of nothing. And that was huge, I think, this week. That he really proved that that's where his talent is. He can make something out of nothing, and he did that in this game. He really showed them, like, this is who I am. Like, this is what you got in me when you drafted me. That's huge right now for Gibbs owners, because I think that just pushes it. Like I said, I don't know if it's going to be an exact split, but I think Gibbs is going to get a heavier workload when Montgomery comes back, because they know they can rely on him now.
Yeah, I think the days of 5 carries for David Montgomery might be over. You still might get 20 carries for David Montgomery, so that workload is still going to be there for Montgomery, just based on the way that the offense has operated the first bunch of weeks, and how they've actually, their strategy of run, play action pass, and hit a guy over the middle, because they're expecting to run. Or the opponent's expecting to run, rather. And so, yeah, listen, they tried to do it here. Gibbs actually made it work. And, I think that they're heading into a bye week this week. So coming out of the bye, yes, David Montgomery is going to get his workload. I do agree with you. Gibbs will get his work. I don't know that he's going to get a very heavy amount of work, which is why last week heading into it, I said sell high on Gibbs. Now I'm going to say sell higher, because I think that his value just from the last week has proven that you could haul for this guy. I think that there's a lot of people out there that heads turned this week when Gibbs went off. Obviously, dynasty owners, you're thrilled because you kind of were dreading this the first couple of weeks, and you're like, is this going to be like this the whole time? David Montgomery signed a 3-year contract with the Lions. Is it going to be like this for 3 straight years of Gibbs's 5-year contract, or 4 years and the 5th-year option? Is it like this? I don't think it is. So, I think that the dynasty owners at least were thrilled that he got this kind of workload. Again, as far as redraft goes, sell higher, because Monty will come back, and obviously the bye week in between, they did it on purpose. They said that he was going to be questionable, and it was pretty obvious that they were going to let David Montgomery rest this week to go through the bye week and then come back next week. That said, I think that for me, at least, the other thing that was really good was the fact that he scored at home. That was a big thing that was being talked about this week, that he hadn't scored a home touchdown. Finally gets it. It was like a 27-yarder, pretty play. And so, get in the end zone, get that confidence, and, keep going. But yeah, sell higher.
I mean, that's fair. Like his values, I don't think it's going to be as high as it is right now for the rest of the season, because of course that big game, Monty's coming back in a week or two. Like they're coming into a bye now, and he still has that value because they're in a bye right now. But Monty maybe back after the bye. Like I think that's maybe what they're looking at, or maybe if it's not the week after, then it's the week after that. Like I think that's going to be a really big thing right now. You got to sell high on him. I agree with you, unless you're in a situation where you're like, I need to keep this guy. He's my number one. Like, lock it in. I need to keep him. Other than that, like, sell high. Try to at least. I think that's big.
Yeah, completely. All right, so now let's jump over to our next standout here. Is DeAndre Hopkins and Zach. I mean, we just kind of spoke about him, but just briefly, like, he only had 4 catches. 3 of them went for touchdowns, though. 22% target share. I mean, just keep throwing the ball to D-Hop, I guess.
That's exactly what I was going to say here. I said keep giving them the ball. Will Levis is the quarterback. Build that chemistry between those two. Keep throwing the ball at your top target, and it's going to help fantasy owners. Of course, just D-Hop in general, like, made so much out of all of those plays. I mean, of course, a couple of them are deep shots right in his hands. So great job by Levis. They just handed off a touchdown, basically. But D-Hop did a couple of them where he put in some good work to get through the defense, and he showed his talents there. But that's huge right now, especially the news we found out today, Brett, that Levis is starting. Huge for D-Hop.
Yeah.
Like, that's massive because he knows he can rely on him now, and why wouldn't he? He's DeAndre Hopkins, so I think that's huge heading into this week.
Completely, and I think that as far as it goes with a rookie, it's going to be he's going to come up to him probably in the locker room and say, "Hey, if you want to throw the ball up to me, that would be cool," and I'll go up and grab it. And then what you see, and we kind of saw that. I think that kind of continues here as the rookie gets more integrated into the NFL and the speed of the NFL game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
All right, so now let's just jump right into the game preview, I guess. As we take in Thursday Night Football tomorrow, Tennessee taking on Pittsburgh. And Zach, let's just talk running back room. Derrick Henry seems like it's sort of a split right now. It's not entirely going to go Derrick Henry's way until test week, where he got 22 carries, 101 yards. I mean, do we really have to worry about Tajay Spears coming in? Derrick Henry did not get traded, which I think is a very important thing that was speculated about in the last couple days. But, is this just ride Derrick Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Of course, there's the question now of, okay, well, Will Levis is the quarterback, and I think they're going to get carries. I think they're also going to rely on Will Levis a little bit more if he can do what he did the other day. Henry, for me, is still clearly the lead back. They proved that last week. That I think that's huge right now. 22 carries for 101 yards. Like, it's a typical Derrick Henry workload. Of course, you want more. You want more yards. Like 4.6 yards per carry. He was making that like 7 or 8 a couple of years ago. So I think that was huge for Henry. Right now, I would have to say that he's the number one guy, and I'm a little like fantasy owners could be worried about Spears, but I wouldn't be too worried about Spears where I'm just freaking out that Derrick Henry's got to get off my team. Like, I think Derrick Henry will be good enough for you. The touchdowns will come. Of course, only 3 of them so far this season. He'll figure it out, and he'll get back to Derrick Henry heights. And I think with Levis at quarterback, that'll help him as well. Right.
Yeah, I agree. And just to note, Minka Fitzpatrick is out. And so just seeing it here. And so I think that's actually going to be a very helpful as far as it goes for D-Hop. So, listen, D-Hop's probably a top 20 receiver or just about 20th receiver on the board, I would say. Yeah,
I agree with you. He's just in that area. That's probably it's a good matchup for him because Pittsburgh has not been great against opposing wide receivers. And of course, if he has that chemistry with Levis, it's huge heading into this one. I mean, for Pittsburgh, I feel like it was okay last week. Like they need to figure out, like they kind of figured out who was the number one guy, and Deontay got a ton of targets last week. They kind of went back to what happened last year. Like it was Deontay and then Pickens. Of course, Freiermuth is out right now, so they're not relying on an extra target and a tight end. But I feel like Deontay kind of took back that number one reign at wide receiver last week. And it was just volume-wise, he was really, really solid. It ended up turning into a really solid output for the week in that one. 8 receptions, 85 yards. Didn't get a touchdown, but we know Deontay Johnson, and of course, fantasy owners everywhere keep killing on him. The touchdowns, I think they'll start to come, Brett. I'm not too worried. People, oh well, he's allergic to getting into the end zone. No, all right. We keep hearing that, so I think he'll be all right. I think the touchdowns will come, and it's weird because Pickett is dealing with a couple injuries. I'm a little worried about that with of course, if Trubisky's playing, like I feel like it's a little bit different, but I don't know. I'm still confident in that wide receiver group.
Yeah, I think what was important here, he was listed as a full participant. No injury designation heading into tomorrow night, Pickett, rib injury. And so I think he'll be okay. It seems like he's ready to go, and obviously the game tomorrow night. And so not carrying an injury designation seems to indicate that he will play and he will start. And just back to the allergic to the end zone thing, and they said the same thing about George Pickens last season. And I mean, he's proven to be just okay, at getting into the end zone now. And so, I mean, listen, it is what it is. As far as the running back room goes, Najee Harris, straight split with Jaylen Warren. And I still think that at least Jaylen Warren is worth a roster spot right now, just based on the fact that there is upside. Still available in over 30, just about 35% of leagues. And so I'm not sure why that number is so high of 35, but if Jaylen Warren is available in your league, I would go out and grab him. Just a stash candidate. Listen, you never really know because Mike Tomlin loves to run the ball for so many years, and he's sort of staying away from that right now, and it's just based on the efficiency. As far as it goes with Warren, I think that he is the heir to the throne at this point. I'm not sure that Najee is really impressing him. And Mike Tomlin has been very easy to pull the plug on guys. Listen, we saw it with James Conner, where he took over. And then James Conner was the guy who got shipped out. And so the history hasn't been on the running back side where he's kind of quick to pull the plug. And so obviously Najee's on a rookie contract. But, long term, it's almost like a sell low for me right now in dynasty perspective, because I'm not sure that you're going to get much value for him in a little bit. That's watch him go rush like 4 touchdowns this weekend. But as far as it goes, I'm kind of sticking away right now from Najee. Not very impressed. He's probably a flex play for me right now.
I'd probably put him in that spot too, Brett. It's just, I feel like I can't just rely on him so much. Like there's so many just off weeks, and in this offense, they're not great. So that's the biggest thing right now. Their offense is not great. It's good. It's not great. And I feel like his heights are not as intriguing to fantasy football owners. A couple of the receivers' heights are not even that great. Like when it comes to Deontay and Pickens, because we just don't know what the touchdown output kind of thing is going to be. I agree with people on that it's got to come soon. I feel like a guy like Najee, the upside is just not great in this offense right now.
Yeah, I don't know how high the ceiling really is. So
yeah.
All right, let's just jump right on to our next game here. Miami at Kansas City. Zach, I absolutely screamed at the television when Sky Moore dropped the touchdown because it was like, here it comes. This is gonna be the thing that actually makes him this relevant fantasy player from all the dynasty perspectives that everybody is clamoring for so many years, and then he dropped it. And it was like, come on. So Pat Mahomes goes another week with no number one receiver, who is named Travis Kelce, obviously. Plain simple, he had the worst statistical game of his entire career. Abysmal. He just was abysmal. Didn't really do much of anything. Kelce had a nice game, 6 catches, 58 yards, 9 targets. But for the most part, the whole Chiefs offense was nothing, a bunch of nothing.
Yeah, it was one of those games where I don't think we'll see a worse game from this Kansas City offense for another like 2-3 years, Brett. Like it was that bad. Like they were awful in that game. And of course, Mahomes was not great either. Like still completed 63% of his passes somehow for 240 yards. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's good. No touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I don't think he's not going to have a touchdown for like in a game for another 2 years. Like that's what I'm saying. It was one game where just everything could have gone wrong. Everything that could have possibly gone wrong did go wrong. They have this game now against Miami where I think I think we're in for a good one here, Brett. I think it's going to end up being a shootout. Like these two offenses are going to start rolling. I would probably prefer Kansas City's defense to Miami's defense, and maybe that hasn't been proven the last couple of weeks, could just based on how these teams have played. But I think this is going to be a shootout. Like I think these offenses are ready to roll. There's no home team in this one. It's a neutral game, so that's going to be big for me. I think we're in for a big fantasy day for all of these guys. Right?
Yeah, as far as it goes in Kansas City, I'm just hoping that somebody comes out that's not Travis Kelce and can make some catches, make some plays here. The Pat Mahomes was happy with last week. He's dealing with the criticism this week, obviously, and so he's going to come out and play this one to win. Obviously, he's going to be more patient the whole bit. You don't have to worry about him. Set it and forget it. He's in your lineup, even if you had him last week, you were disappointed. As far as Miami side goes, I think this could be the week where Andy Reid really tries to channel in on Tyreek Hill. Obviously, they know him. They've had him. They know what he's good at. This might be the week that Germany learns how to waddle. They're going to be running around the field doing the waddle dance, and I think this is a week that happens. I think that 7 catches, 121 yards. He had a touchdown last week, and it was kind of a split. 13 targets for Tyreek and 12 targets for Jalen Waddle. I think that Waddle will be the guy that is more open this time around. Based off of the defense, I think they're going to scheme it towards Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely make sense. And of course, they know him very well, so they're going to try and find a way to stop him. There's not many teams that have been. I don't know if any team's been able to stop him, but I think they could try and limit him. And yes, Waddle could have a big game in the end, Brett. Like I said, everybody like in these offenses, the main guys, I think you're full go on them. The defenses of both teams haven't been great, and I think that's going to lead to a lot here.
All right, start your guys.
Exactly.
But let's just move right on to the next one here. Seattle at Baltimore, and Zach. Just to first start off here, Seattle went out and made a good move for Leonard Williams, and I think that that's going to be a pretty good deal for the Seattle defense, and quite a threat on the inside.
Yeah, just a big boost to that defensive line. I think that's they're going for it, Brett. Like they're in a spot where they can go for it. They got a really solid team, and in the NFC West now, San Fran's starting to lose, and Seattle's just jumping up there in the standings. Of course, they're in first right now, 5-2. Like that's big for Seattle to grab that help on defense, and they've been really, really good, Brett. There's not much else to say about it. Like they've been really solid, and I think that's going to end up helping them in the long run. they know they can rely on their defense, and that's going to lead to more points for the offense because they're going to get turnovers. They're going to get the ball back and put them in good situations there.
Yeah, so now translating it to this game here, I think that they're literally going to block the inside of the line here, and so it could be a game where Lamar actually starts to take off outside the pocket. A lot of rollouts, things like that. Not expect a huge game out of Gus Edwards this week, just based off of that. I'm not. I don't think that Gus Edwards is a very good candidate this week, other than a flex. Very touchdown dependent is where I would put it. Just based on the Seattle defensive line has been really good all year round, and now they add a guy like a Leonard Williams. So, he to me is also a flex. I think this could be the week that Odell Beckham Jr. actually gets some steam here. I'm not saying he's going to go off or anything, but you saw obviously the tape at the end of the game there, slamming the helmet. I think that this is going to be a week where they kind of up his confidence a bit, try to get him in a bit more as well. Obviously, you got Mark Andrews still going to do his thing. I think Zay Flowers actually, they're going to try to highlight him a lot more. He got 7 targets last week, 5 catches for only 19 yards. That said, I think that they're really going to try to eliminate him with Witherspoon, and Witherspoon's been really good pretty much the whole season. And so, yeah, we'll see. I mean, as far as it goes, though, you're obviously starting Lamar, you're starting Mark Andrews, and then I would just kind of keep an eye on the radar right now for Odell.
Yeah, I think that's a curious one. I might have to agree with you there. I think that looking at this Seattle defense, they're really heavy up front in the first part of their secondary. So I think they can limit Flowers and maybe Andrews may struggle in this one, but they're also a team who's in the past given up a ton of points, a ton of yards to different wide receivers and tight ends. I think that's big heading into this one. I think the other big part of this is it's in Baltimore. I think that's huge for Baltimore. They always come out and have really solid games. Their one blip was against Indianapolis this year, but the rest of them, they've been really solid at home. And I think it could be another solid week for them once again. I'm a little bit more of a believer in Gus Edwards than you are right now, because just what he was able to do last week, a really solid output, and was one of the top running backs in fantasy last week. I'm a little higher on him than you are. I do think Seattle's defense is going to try and work around him, but I think, flex is probably the perfect spot for him, but I think there's a little bit of upside there now next to Lamar, because he's kind of proven that he's the number one guy there. That's what I'm looking at with him.
Yeah, I think that just, he was going up against Arizona, which was the bottom 10 rushing defense. Now he has to go face the top 10 rushing defense in Seattle. Obviously, the addition of Leonard Williams, I think, just ups it just a bit more for me. So that's the only reason I say it. It's not a knock on Gus. I mean, he's been really good the whole year riding the Gus bus. But, yeah, this is a week where I would look to see if I had another option there at my running back 2 spot.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Definitely fair.
And then as far as Seattle goes, I mean, it's pretty much status quo on all of them. Tyler Lockett had a great game. 9 targets. He had 8 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. Jackson Smith-Njigba had another touchdown this week. 3 catches, 36 yards, and a touchdown. And so, Zach, just as far as the Njigba, Jake Bobo, who had 2 catches for 23 yards, a deeper ad there in Dynasty at least. As far as the receiving game goes, how do you foresee it going on in the next couple weeks here?
So it's interesting because there's just so many of them. And of course, Jake Bobo's now coming in and putting up stats. I don't think those will last for the rest of the year, just because he's the number 4 guy. There's 3 guys ahead of him. So I don't know if that's a consistent guy I can really look at it when it comes to redraft. But right now, the biggest thing for this offense is kind of just feeding all of them. Of course, DK, you would probably assume that he's the number 1, but I feel like any one of these guys can end up having a great week, Brett. Like that's the thing about this offense, and really the thing about any of these high powered offenses. You don't know who's going to end up being the number one guy. Yes, they can lean towards one guy over the other two, but any of these guys can go off. They're very talented, all three of them. If I put it in order, of course, it would be DK, then Lockett, then Smith and Jigba. But like I said, any of these guys can go off on a given week. And against Baltimore's defense has been really, really good, like really solid, one of the best in the NFL. They shut down the high-powered Detroit Lions offense a couple weeks ago, like trounced them. So I think that just positivity heading into this one against Seattle. What I will say is Seattle's going to have to find a way, and it could end up being a game from a guy like Smith and Jigba, who maybe they put a little bit less pressure on him, Baltimore, and it leads to more openings for him. That's right. The biggest thing for me this week.
Yeah, very, very possible. Listen, Metcalf, just a quick note on him, 14 targets last week. He only got 5 catches for 67 yards, but, a ton of work going his way. It just kind of wasn't in his areas. And so obviously a much needed improvement there, but the workload was there. And so I think at least for him, you can probably start him as a wide receiver 2. And he's got a lot of upside to go even higher than that, making more of those catches. Obviously gets in the end zone one time and he's worth it. So yeah, he's a mid-level wide receiver 2 for me right now, I would say. But yeah, as far as that with Njigba, I agree with you. I think that they're going to really channel into going after those other guys, and Smith and Jigba becomes. Listen, right now he's probably a low-end flex play just based on he's not getting the workload. Yeah, he's getting into the end zone, but he's not getting the workload. And obviously, a couple weeks ago we had the target share because DK was not there. But we kind of saw that come back down to earth a little bit last week. So again, it's a guy that you want to at least on your roster. He's still out there in pretty much half of the leagues. I believe it's like 50% or something like that that he's rostered in. And so that's 45% that he's not rostered in. So he's at least worth a roster spot because I think that as the season goes on, they are going to utilize him more. He was a first-round pick for them. But that said, DK is the guy, and it's going to run through DK. Plain and simple, it's going to run through Lockett. And so Njigba is the third option. And Bobo's even the fourth option.
Exactly. I think that's very fair. And like I said, any guy can come up on a given week. Like, could be a week like this against a really, really tough defense.
Yeah. So now let's jump right to the next one. And Zach, Arizona, Cleveland. We first got to talk about Trey McBride. The dude is awesome. It was a dynasty asset coming into his second year. Had a great stretch at the end of the season with Kyler Murray. Comes into this season and he still has Zach Ertz there. Ertz goes down. All of a sudden, leaks out. McBride's going to get more of a workload, and sure enough, he did. 14 targets. He got 10 catches for 95 yards, scored a touchdown, just over 25 standard PPR points. I mean, he's got to be at least rostered in everyone, and he's probably even a low-end tight end 1 this week.
Yeah, Brett, and yeah, it's a tough matchup, but he did it against arguably an even tougher matchup against tight ends. He did it against Baltimore, who is actually 31st against or second best even against tight ends. He's going up against the best defense against tight ends this week. But like I said, he's proven that it doesn't matter who's a tough defense. Like Trey McBride's going to get those targets. It's going to be weird this week because, of course, Clayton Tune probably in at quarterback. So kind of got to figure that out and make sure that's a good pairing. And he will maybe rely on Trey McBride. I think the upside's a little bit lower than it would be with a guy like Dobbs. But I agree with you that a low-end tight end 1's probably a spot for him just because there's not much else in Arizona. There really isn't. Yeah. So I feel like just those checkdowns for a young quarterback are going to be huge. And Trey McBride is going to make a lot out of nothing, I think, especially this week against Cleveland.
I agree. And listen, he's only owned in 25% of leagues. He is out there in every single league, or pretty much every single league. And so that means out of four, if you're in 4 leagues, he's available in 3 of them. Go get him. I don't understand why people are not picking him up. I thought that it would be a way higher percentage this week. 14 targets. Again, Kyler Murray is coming back. It was hinted that he could potentially be back this week. I don't see that happening. But I think that there's a lot of noise, and Kyler, of course, has practiced in full for a week and a couple days now. And so there has been no limited practices. He's practiced completely full. So I fully expect him to come back next week. But it'll be late in tune this week if he doesn't come back. So, yeah, I think that I agree with you. The young quarterback, he'll at least get some work there with Trey McBride. And then when Kyler comes back, again, that chemistry that they had at the end of last season can't be denied. He was their best receiver, I think, at least down the stretch of last season. It was Trey McBride. And so at least roster him. I don't understand why he's out there in so many leagues.
Yeah. We need to raise that, Brett. Like, you pick this guy up. Like, of course, Ertz is on IR right now. Like, there's not much else in Arizona. Like, there's fantasy points to be found there, and a lot of them will come from Trey McBride. I agree with you, Brett. We got to raise that number. What are we doing?
Yeah, I don't get it. As far as it goes on Cleveland's side of the ball, Zach, we got to start out at quarterback and the situation there. PJ Walker was in there, Deshaun Watson coming back, and what do we think about Deshaun and how he elevates this offense?
I think it's kind of back to what it was when he was first playing. I think that was huge. Just looking at this team and how they're built, they're kind of built for Deshaun Watson. Like, they're built for him to be the star quarterback, and of course, now he has 2 solid running backs with Hunt and Jerome Ford. So that's huge for him. I think the biggest thing is getting his biggest targets. Amari Cooper, David Njoku has been really good the last couple of weeks. That's a guy maybe I feel like Deshaun can rely on a lot more than he did earlier in the season. And then Elijah Moore is probably the third guy. Like, I'm expecting Cooper to be really, really solid for the rest of the season as long as Watson's there, because I feel like they just know that experienced players just kind of read each other and they know where each other's going to be, and they've worked together a couple times. Like, they definitely are a pairing that I feel like can be successful. Like I said, as long as Deshaun is healthy, Cooper's getting a boost for the rest of the season just because of that number one target and really just getting the job done.
Yeah, I think workload is certainly going to be there. You got 11 targets last week. 8 targets went to Njoku as well. And so I think that the 2 of them probably are where it's going to keep going. Also, like you said, that tandem of Hunt and Jerome Ford, I think, is going to be more in full force this week, really, because they sort of limited Jerome Ford last week coming off the injury, and he was banged up. And so this week he gets healthy. He's listed as questionable right now. For the most part, seems like he's going to be going, and he's healthier. And so I think that that's important as well. Strong Jr. also as well added some stuff there. So change of pace back, and obviously he also had like a 41-yard catch, so boosted his stat line. But yeah, I think that I agree with you. It's kind of just going to go back to normal. Cooper and Joe, then you got to obviously start Jerome Ford if he is in fact healthy. Kareem Hunt as well. I would say probably the flex consideration.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's weird because it might end up being a split between these 2 guys. The one thing I'll say is they could end up both having a great game because they're going up against Arizona, and we saw what Gus Edwards was able to do against this defense last week. Like, it's hard to really just pick one above the other because, of course, Hunt probably going to get the touchdowns, Ford more of the volume. But even so,
Right.
like, they're both solid options out of the backfield right now.
Completely. All right, so let's jump right to our next matchup. And Zach, it is Tampa Bay taking on the Houston Texans. And I mean, which team you want to start with here?
Oh boy. Let's start with Houston.
Okay, so
Stroud's been good, yeah.
yeah, I mean, listen, it's been up and down as far as Stroud goes. This one not so great week as far as fantasy went. I think it was his lowest total he's had the entire year outside week one. Since week one, he just kind of went on a big run here, and not a great one. And it was playing Carolina and Bryce Young, and that was kind of the storyline. 16 to 24, 140 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown, but he also didn't throw a pick. It was just a pretty average football game. And so not a great fantasy game, pretty average football game. You're going to have those. But at the same time, you're not expecting CJ Stroud to be this upper echelon quarterback. He's probably a super flex, at least starter with the upside to finish as a quarterback one. Pretty good matchup, though, this week with the Bucs, who have not had a defense this year. And so I think you have to consider him. If you're in one of those bye weeks, he's a perfect streamer. He's still out in a lot of leagues as well. He's a perfect streaming candidate, I would say. And as far as it goes yes, you're starting him in super flex. As far as it goes in one quarterback league, I think he's a worthy candidate to start.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And I think people got to just take into consideration what Carolina's defense is pretty solid when they're on. They've had a couple of games where they've shown up and shown out. Last week was one of those games, really, really solid, and they made it difficult for Stroud. I think the biggest thing heading into this week, as you mentioned he's going up against a defense in Tampa Bay who stunk. They've been terrible this year. They've let up so many points to everybody. And I feel like that's a positive thing heading into this week. You're probably gonna you mentioned the bye weeks. There's a couple guys on buys that you got to replace him. Stroud could be a perfect guy for this week, just because of how bad Tampa Bay's been. I think that's huge right now. We saw last week Devin Singletary kind of starting to eat into that Dameon Pierce workload. It didn't happen a lot early in the season, Brett, but we talked about it before the season started. He's going to be that annoying guy. I don't think this all of a sudden, I've seen a ton of ads for Devin Singletary this week, Brett. I don't think Devin Singletary is on the fantasy radar right now. Okay, yes, he's eating into that workload, but he's just going to end up sitting on people's benches. He's not a fantasy option in my mind. Pierce, of course, struggled and has been struggling a bit. I don't know if I can trust either right now. That's how I'm feeling on it. And I think, like I said, Singletary is just not an option for me in fantasy right now, even though a ton of people are freaking out and adding him. I think they're going to rely on those receivers and those weapons a lot more than the running game in the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the receivers are kind of what's making this offense go. And there's a ton of them. I mean, there's a ton of them. You and I were talking about it beforehand of Dalton Schultz and his value, just the workload. And yeah, it was a bad week last week. But every week prior to that, he's had, a very, very high target share. I think he gets back to that, especially this week. Good matchup again for him against a team that has not been amazing against the tight end position.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's he's shown in that target share that he could definitely step up and be one of Stroud's number one guys. You mentioned the great matchup. that's the perfect time to do it, and especially this week against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, completely. All right, so then as far as Tampa goes, Zach, I mean, first off, we just have to mention that Mike Evans was not traded. Another guy who is potentially going to be out there. They kind of just said no. So I don't think that the offense really is going to change all that much. I think it's still going to go through the two receivers, Godwin and Evans, our favorite fantasy owners, as fantasy owners, our two favorite players that we don't like to draft every single year. But listen, they've been pretty good this year. So, they're getting into the end zone. Baker's finding them when he gets into the red zone. And so each of them scored a touchdown. So I think that that's what the big takeaway for me this last week was. You're probably rolling them both out there. Cade Otton, he's been getting work well. He got 6 targets last week. 4 catches for 27 yards. He's at least a deeper league tight end option to add. I'm saying not to start, but at least he's a rosterable guy in deeper leagues, I would say, just based on the workload is starting to come there. Double 2 games in a row with 6 targets. Sorry, the English is not helping right now. 2 games in a row, we had 6 targets. And so I think that's going to start to continue. And listen, everybody's out there rushing for Trey Palmer. I don't know that that's going to be much of anything. The workload was there for him. He didn't exactly do much. So he's probably a better option out there as far as waivers go.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. Like right now in Tampa, it's been rough. They 3-game losing streak, so they're straight after the bye. So it hasn't been easy matchups either. Atlanta probably you would say is the most winnable game of those 3, but they went up against Buffalo and Detroit and got trounced in those games. The offense has just been struggling, and they're trying to just find ways. I think they're gonna just go back to the well with their top guys in Godwin and Evans. It's not gonna be an easy matchup this week. The Texans are actually one of the best pass defenses in all of the NFL. So I think that's not going to be easy for them. But of course, Rachaad White as the number 1 back, I would probably put him as a flex guy. I think that's just probably the spot for him right now. I think that's where he sits. And like I said, I think they're just going to go back to the well on those 2 guys with Godwin and Evans, and hopefully something works. But I feel like a matchup in Houston is not easy for this team, and maybe some people will end up staying away from guys.
Totally agree, 100%. Let's jump right into our next match. And Zach, it is the Chicago Bears as they travel into New Orleans in what will be yet another tough matchup here for the Chicago Bears. Their top scorer last week, listen, it was Cole Kmet. 10 catches, 10 targets, 79 yards. And Tyson, listen, he likes his tight ends clearly because that was the guy who he got going. They obviously wanted to try to get DJ Moore into the workload, but it seemed that the Chargers were really channeling in on trying to stop DJ Moore. And so he said, okay, I'll go to Cole Kmet, and kind of worked for pretty much most of the game.
Yeah, Brad, that's fair. Like he ended up in a spot where LA was just trouncing them kind of early, and they kind of had to figure something out. Of course, with Bajan as their quarterback, you're not going to rely on him to be taking deep shots downfield, and that does hurt the value of a guy like DJ Moore. Of course, Cole Kmet taking in all of those catches, huge. He's going to end up being a solid option once again for this week's matchup, a reliable, probably near tight end 1. Like he's in that area. It's a tough matchup against New Orleans, but I feel like in this offense and with how little they kind of have and relying on Bajan, those kind of games, they really find a way, even though it's a tough matchup, to find those guys no matter what. And I think this is one of those weeks where Cole Kmet, even though it's a tough defense, like he'll get those targets against New Orleans. Right now for Chicago, the running game is a little weird. Of course, last week it was off as well because they were down so much in that one. I don't feel like I can trust any of the guys to put them in my lineup. Foreman and Roshan, like I don't think there's one that I'd pick over the other. I think they're just going to get the same old workload, and they're going to be losing, and they're going to have to throw. I think that's kind of where I'm at with those guys, and that's just what it is right now with Fields out and Bajan in at quarterback, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, listen, just as far as it goes with that kind of quarterback, you can't expect the moon. So therefore, plain and simple, you have to take everything in stride. As far as the running back situation goes, Roshan Johnson kind of had a split with Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman came back to earth. I don't know that I'm really starting either guy right now. They're kind of scary, both of them, plain and simple, because we never really know who's going to get more of the workload and how efficient they're going to be. So while they're both rosterable players, I would say they're probably not startable right now, at least for now, till we can figure out who is the guy in charge of the committee. Because right now, I think it's a straight split.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the thing about it also is, of course, Fields is not there. So we can't
Right.
completely get a read on who's the number one guy, who's gonna be the number one guy when Fields is in there and he's taking a lot of those carries as well. That's the biggest thing right now. So I'd in the end just stay away from him. I think that hold them on your bench and rely on other guys around them.
Yeah, and it should be noted that, of course, Khalil Herbert was placed IR with a high ankle sprain, and there's a lot of talk out there that he might not be eligible. He might not be available when he's first eligible in week 10. And so, at least it makes it more palatable to keep them on your roster rather than just dropping them to waivers. But you're certainly not starting either one, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And then just let's go through New Orleans quickly. Obviously, you got to start at the quarterback position. It was a abysmal game yet again for Derek Carr, and yet he finished as a pretty good quarterback this past week. And, it just kind of shows the difference between fantasy and reality here in terms of the NFL. Carr, he was still threw for 310 yards, had 2 touchdowns, and there were times in the game where it looked like they might bench him, and yet he battled through it. And so, yeah, I cringe every time I see Derek Carr out there, and he's proving that he's a quality fantasy option.
Yeah, Brett, I actually picked him up this week or just a couple days ago, just because of Patrick Mahomes is actually going on a bye next week, and I kind of have to figure something out. So there you go. I picked Derek Carr. He's going to get a good matchup next week. But I mean, this week is the best possible matchup. He gets the Chicago defense, who, yeah, they were good a couple weeks, but haven't been great. So I think he's going to have a really solid game. I think the biggest player in fantasy football this week, be happy if you have him. I think Alvin Kamara is that guy this week. That's the guy that he's going to put up a ton of points. They're just going to run him into the ground, into this Chicago defense. Because why not? He's Alvin Kamara. I think it's going to be a monster week for him. And a lot of people have him as the running back one this week. Of course, McCaffrey on the bye. Yeah, I agree with them. Like, Chicago's defense is miserable, and Kamara is going to have a huge workload down in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think it was just the fact that he had, 12 catches like a couple weeks ago against Jacksonville. We were like, what is happening here? I think that he's actually going to get some decent amount of catches. And he only had 4 last week, but I think that number actually went up again this week. Michael Thomas. I got to talk about Michael Thomas. 7 targets in this game, or in last week's game, 68 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but Zach, I've been saying it for the last couple of weeks just because I'm kind of in shock, and I own Michael Thomas in our Dynasty League. Michael Thomas is back, and that's awesome. I mean, just plain and simple, he looks great. Plain and simple, he looks great. Obviously, it's coming in a season where Chris Olave has not been reliable at all. But I would say that the floor right now for Michael Thomas is really high, and so it's a guy that you could pretty much put him in. If you're in a bind any week, you could put him in your flex and expect he's going to get a lot of points. He's really just exceeding pretty much every expectation right now that I've had for him. And this past week, Olave had 9 targets. He only had 46 yards, 5 catches. I think that obviously is very concerning right now. There's a lot of people that are saying, hey, this will be the game to get him right. Remains to be seen. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm, a guy who is targeting Olave as a buy low guy right now. But if I had owned Olave, which I don't in any of my leagues, I would be a little concerned here.
I'm very concerned, Brett. I have Olave in 3 leagues, and it's just such a situation where, like, I don't want to give up on him just yet, but the time might be coming. Like, it's around there, and I know that if I want to make a playoff push, like, and be solid in the playoffs, like, I think getting rid of a guy like Olave right now is probably going to be helpful. I'm hoping that this week he figures something out because he's can't get much worse than the Chicago defense. Am I right? So like,
Yeah.
make something happen this week. That's a big ask for Olave right now.
Yeah, I just think that if you're an Olave owner, it's not even like you can turn around and say, "Hey, here's Chris Olave, give me your best receiver." It's just not like that anymore. It's a sell low, and it's almost like you'd have to package him with another player just to get upper echelon player. That's kind of where I see it going right now. As far as his trade value goes, yeah, it's a sad time. But hey, if you're a Michael Thomas owner, then you're really happy right now because it seems that all that work is now going to Michael Thomas, and he's been the reliable one, which we really just did not see coming heading into the season.
Yeah, definitely fair, Brett.
Just quickly, Rashid Shaheed, 3 catches, 153 yards, only 3 targets though, and so it's been pretty much figured out that Rashid Shaheed is their deep threat. I don't know that he's going to be this guy that's going to put up top dollar points every single week. He is a rosterable player just based on the output. Obviously, this past week, he got picked up in quite a bit of leagues. He's a rosterable player, plain and simple. I think that if you own him in Dynasty, you're excited because you see the potential there. But yeah, I'm waiting and seeing on him. I'm not starting him this week.
I agree with you. I think like maybe a target on the waiver wire, but that's probably about it for Rashid Shaheed right now.
Yep, completely agree. Let's jump right next to our next game here. It is Minnesota, Atlanta, and Zach. Let's start off with Minnesota, and we sort of spoke about it, so we'll be brief about it. But it seems that Josh Dobbs might be the starter, but it really looks like it's going to end up being Jaron Hall. I think that this really helps everyone's value. Plain and simple, the Josh Dobbs acquisition, like we spoke about, I'm really not worried. This week should be a little interesting from a perspective of I think they're really going to feed Addison the ball a lot, and the dump offs are all going to go to Hawkinson. I don't know that anybody else really is going to make much of an impact on this team.
So, yeah, I mean, that's fair. What I'm going to say heading into this week is they're going down to Atlanta, and they're playing in Atlanta. Brett, I'm not going to lie. I think they're going to get trounced this week. Just going to be completely honest. I think they're going to be terrible this week because Atlanta's just kind of locked in right now, and it's in Atlanta, and they're going to take advantage of a quarterback who hasn't played in this offense. So that's going to be their mindset. Yeah. I think it's going to be a rough week for a lot of them. And now, with that said, like I wouldn't start being like, oh, well, got to bench Addison, got to bench Hawkinson. No, you're starting those guys. But I think you're definitely like lowering the expectations for this week. I'd move probably Addison to probably a flex this week, like low end wide receiver 2 flex. Like that's the range right now. And Hawkinson, of course, you're going to start him as a tight end 1. But I feel like he's going to finish a little bit lower than that. Like it'll be a rough week for them, like to say the least. Yeah, there's going to be points to be found there, but I think Atlanta is going to be all over them in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's going to be I really do. I think it's going to be a rough week for them. I think that they're going to try to force feed the ball, though. Again, like I just said, I think they're going to try to force feed the ball here to Addison. And when they can't out, I think that they're going to try to throw it over the middle of Hawkinson. Plain and simple, I don't see that the running defense is going to be much of anything because I think they're going to basically try to force the kid to throw the ball to make a mistake. That's where I see this game plan going. I think that Arthur Smith's not a dumb guy when it comes to that stuff. Plain and simple. I think that's pretty simple. What is not that simple and is a little more complicated is the situation at quarterback for Atlanta. They go with Taylor Heineke. They announced Heineke as the starter. And, obviously this raises a lot of questions of is it going to be good for Bijan? Is it going to be good for London? Is it going to be good for Pitts? There's a lot of question marks out there of, Taylor Heineke and he's been able to do in his career. I think this is great for them. I really do. I think that they signed Heineke for $20 million. They gave him money. I think he's actually probably a top 20 quarterback right now. just based on the fact that I think they're going to let him throw the ball more, which really Desmond Ridder, they didn't want him to throw the ball because he just was very mistake prone. I think this might actually be the anecdote that saves Kyle Pitts this season.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I actually I'm in a spot where I have to start Kyle Pitts this week because Sam Laporta's on a bye. So I'm all in on Kyle Pitts. Hopefully he turns it up for me here in with the Heineke at quarterback. I think that's huge for them. We've been asking for this, Brett, you and I, for I think like 4 weeks now. We're just like, just get Taylor. Anybody else besides Desmond Ridder, like just get him in there. And of course, Taylor Heineke is a really good option to throw in there. Experienced quarterback has done a fair amount and obviously made it to the playoffs with Washington. So that's big. I think just he knows he has those weapons, and it'll really bring out the best in all of these guys. They got a good matchup against Minnesota. Minnesota's defense has been better the last couple of weeks, which a little worrying, but like I said, I think that this game's going to be a blowout. I think that's what it's going to be right now, and Atlanta's going to be in good spots based on just turnovers. Their defense are going to force. Like I think that's going to be good for this offense. And like I said, Heineke, really solid option at quarterback, going to help all 3 or 4 of these guys in this offense to really boost their level this week.
Yeah, I think that it also should be noted that we for it because you obviously own Pitts in your league. I own London in a bunch of leagues as well, and so we were just like, "What is happening here?" I don't understand why they didn't do this move sooner. Plain and simple. Arthur Smith, good job. It took long enough, but he made a move, and I think that this is actually going to work out in the long run. This is going to be the antidote that figures out Kyle Pitts' whole season, I think. And listen, they tried to get London involved quite a bit, and obviously he got 7 targets last week, and most of them came from Taylor Heineke there. Yeah,
so I definitely agree with you. I think that's huge for Atlanta right now, and I think all of these guys. You mentioned London and Pitts. They also hurt Bijan, Desmond Ridder. Like he didn't help him, I would say. Like there was a couple of times, but of course Bijan hasn't gotten to like that level that people drafted him to be. And I think that also can come out with a guy like Heineke, who's going to know how to really get him going with receptions out of the backfield kind of deal and really get the best out of Bijan. I thank God, Arthur Smith. Way to go.
As you can tell, we're ecstatic here. So good job. I think that I agree as far as it goes with the receiving game, where we saw Bijan not only dominate the ground, we saw him dominate through the air. Heineke, I think we're going to see a lot of that screen pass game still continue with Heineke at quarterback. But yeah, I think that overall this is going to improve his whole offense in Atlanta. And like you said, the defense is locked in, so now it's time for the offense to get locked in. I think that it's a good matchup for them as well. Minnesota hasn't been scary, and I think that obviously if you're a Bijan owner, you're excited about the fact that they might blow them out, and all of a sudden this becomes a Bijan game.
Yeah, I mean we saw Gibbs yesterday in a blowout, like not really a blowout, but like it was almost there, and he just started going off the rails. So like I feel like that's what you could maybe expect out of Bijan.
Yeah, completely. Let's jump to our next game here. It is the LA Rams as they travel to Green Bay to take on the Packers at Lambeau Field. And Zach, let's first start off here with Jordan Love, because it seems like the sky is falling from all the Packer fans out there. Are we calming everyone down? Is Jordan Love the answer? There was a whole quote today from the president of the team saying that they're unsure of his long-term future, and there's a big 10 games ahead of him. Like, what do we think of Jordan Love?
So what do I think of Jordan Love? I didn't think he was the answer for quarterback in Green Bay when they drafted him to succeed Aaron Rodgers. I just wasn't a fan really out of college. What I will say is like they have a weird stretch coming up and then some really big games coming up after this stretch. They like 2 of the next 3 are at home. Rams, Steelers, Chargers. And some of those matchups he could take advantage of because some of those defenses struggle in the secondary. But then he goes up against the Lions and the Chiefs. And that is where I feel like he should end up. There's going to be decisions made heading into those two games because those are the big ones. If he can get through these three in the Rams, Steelers, and Chargers, defenses that he can take advantage of, then maybe I'll change my belief. I'm not a huge Jordan Love guy. Like I said, I wasn't a fan coming really out of college. But in this offense, I feel like this running game is just non-existent right now. I'm confused on what they're kind of thinking. They have a quarterback in Jordan Love who that he's not going to throw for 350 and 4 touchdowns. He's not that kind of player. He's a game manager type quarterback that can really get the job done with handing the ball off to his running backs and relying on them and then making smart plays from the pocket. That's what he is. And they're kind of making him into a little bit of a hero ball type of quarterback. And I just don't think that's what he is. I think that's the problem right now in Green Bay.
Yeah, we really were talking about earlier about how Aaron Jones season, it was going to be Aaron Jones season. It really hasn't been. They've only given him, obviously he got injured, but between his games here, he's only played in 4. He's got 9 carries, 5 carries, 8 carries, and 7 carries. I mean, what do we do? Free Aaron Jones. Free Aaron Jones. We talk about this every single year. I don't understand where the workload is going. It's not going to A.J. Dillon. Listen, A.J. Dillon, he had that 1 week where he had the bulk of the carries because obviously 1 week Aaron Jones was not in the game, so he got 20 carries because he's the only back there. And then when Aaron Jones was coming off injury, yeah, he had 15 carries, but he's not getting a ton of carries either. He only had 6 carries last week. We're down in the game. I get it. Doesn't matter. This offense runs through those guys and it frees up the wide receivers. So what are we doing here? I don't get what the Packers are doing. They should be running the offense through the running backs and allowing that to free up the receivers. Instead, they're relying on a bunch of young guys at receiver to try to carry the offense right now. And Jordan Love, who is quite honestly, he's a rookie because he really hasn't gotten the full experience of a full NFL season. And they're trying to expect Aaron Rodgers, and they're not. You can't rely on him to be Aaron Rodgers right away. Aaron Rodgers wasn't Aaron Rodgers right away. We spoke about it earlier. When Brett Favre left, they were expecting Aaron Rodgers to be Brett Favre. He wasn't Brett Favre right away. He was, a rookie. Yeah, he was in his 4th year, but he was a rookie. And that's what Jordan Love, you're seeing it right now. They need to be a little more patient here, and they need to start running the ball more.
I agree with you. I think that just looking at this week, they're going up against a defense now in the Rams who let the Cowboys go to town on them. They need to run the football. Run the football. Give it to Aaron Jones. Free Aaron Jones. Free A.J. Dillon. give them the ball, and that will open up this offense. They have a ton of weapons at receiver that they can end up getting them the ball once the offense opens up. But if you just start throwing the ball, puts Jordan Love in a bad spot, puts the offense overall in a bad spot. So I'm confident going into this week that they'll finally start to run the ball after they saw what the Cowboys offense was able to do against this Rams defense last week, and they're at home. So that'll definitely boost some things here. I would say for me right now, Jones it's hard because I think he's just a flex right now. I have not seen Aaron Jones yet. I'm actually debating benching him for somebody who may have a better outlook or more upside going into the matchup. That's where I'm at with Aaron Jones right now. I would recommend starting him as a flex, but I understand completely because I'm in that spot. If you have another option that you see a lot of upside in, take it. Take that shot on him because I don't know when the Packers are going to realize it. Hopefully it's this week and then you get it for the rest of the season, but I don't know if that's going to come this week, Brett.
Yeah, I agree. I think that just as far as the value goes, yeah, you're putting Aaron Jones in, but you're hoping that they do better. I don't know. He's a running back too, though. Plain and simple. He's a running back too. He's Aaron Jones, and we don't know when that game is going to come, but be time where he does eventually get that game. They say he's back. But till you actually see him out there, we don't really know. It's not exactly going up against an easy matchup. That defensive line is still scary. They still have Aaron Donald. But as far as the rest goes, I mean, I'm kind of just stashing everybody. I don't know that I'm really thrilled to start any Packer right now.
Agree with you. And for the Rams, Brett, of course, they're having a bit of a running back committee, it seems like, that Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman. I've seen a lot of ads for Royce Freeman. Yeah, that could be a good thing for this week because Packers let up a fair amount of rushing touchdowns. So Royce Freeman could be an option at flex as just a long shot maybe, or a guy to just fill in for maybe a bye week. I think when it comes to the rest of this offense, like, Cooper Kupp will get going. Like, stop freaking out about Cooper Kupp. He'll be fine. Like, a lot of people have done that after the last couple of weeks. He's all good. He's still Cooper Kupp. Like, they'll be fine. Puka Nacua, exact same. They'll be fine. They'll just start to get those matchups where they can be successful. It has not been easy the last couple of weeks. They've gone up against a couple of defenses who have really taken those guys away, Brett.
Yeah, I think just as far as the running back go, Darrell Henderson actually got more work last week, and he was more of the explosive type runner, leading as many yards. Royce Freeman did get into the end zone, but it seemed that Darrell Henderson was the more explosive runner. So another guy you should just kind of put on it. Puka, Cooper Kupp, they're going to get themselves going. I think this was an off game for them. Obviously, they were getting smacked by Dallas, and so I'm not worried about them at all. Back end starter now for Matt Stafford, I would say as well, in what looks like a little bit of a tasty matchup.
Yep, definitely.
All right, so now we go to our next matchup here, the last one of the 1 o'clock window. Washington at New England. And Zach, I mean, we just spoke about New England, and the consensus was kind of just stay away. So we don't even have to really talk about them. But let's go right to Washington.
Yeah, and Brett, I mean, it's a solid matchup for Sam Howell. I mean, it's not going to be an easy one because he's going up against New England in New England. But I feel like this offense can just kind of to figure things out. When it comes to this matchup this week against New England, like, I would probably say the running backs with Brian Robinson, you're obviously starting there. McLaurin, you're obviously starting. I feel like McLaurin could end up being the guy that they say, oh, well, we're going to focus on him. I feel like they have other options, though, of course, with John Dotson, who had a good week last week. And then they also have Curtis Samuel. I think it's going to be a big week for Logan Thomas, Brett. I think that's kind of the guy that I would focus on if I had to pick one from this Washington offense, just because I feel like they're going to really zone in on McLaurin. And I think Logan Thomas is going to get a lot of openings this week.
Yeah, very well possible. I agree. Obviously, you're starting your regular guys. Jamison Crowder, I thought, was a guy that was a big surprise here. 7 targets, 7 catches, 95 yards. He scored a touchdown. I think he's at least worth the roster spot. I mean, you're not starting him right now, obviously, but he probably is at least worth the roster spot in a lot of those deeper leagues, I would say, just because there's a workload there. Not expecting there to be a ton of work coming his way, but, again, if you're in one of those really deep leagues, he's a guy that I would at least add.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, so let's just jump right to the next one here. It's Indianapolis at Carolina. Zach Gardner Minshew back under center for Indianapolis. And, just kind of quickly, obviously, you're starting your regular guys here. The workload was really there, though, for Michael Pittman and Josh Downs more than the rest.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing with this Indy offense right now. As long as Gardner's in at quarterback, yeah, probably should. You're automatically starting Michael Pittman, but I feel like Downs, yeah, he's in that flex spot. There's some people I'm in that situation. I have Downs, but I have like so many other reliable guys that I'm just gonna have to start them. But of course, if you have an opening there, like at flex, Josh Downs is a perfect guy to put in there. Really, really solid output when he's playing with Gardner. And the running backs, like, Zach Moss is still getting work, Brett. Like, he's still putting up really solid fantasy numbers. Of course, Taylor is like getting the bigger numbers, and yeah, he's the number one guy. But Zach Moss is still in consideration to just be in people's lineups because that's how
Yeah.
this Indy offense is moving, and they've done a great job of that. They get a good matchup this week against Carolina.
Yeah, listen, I mean, he's been really good. He's like a wide receiver. He's like a running back too. And so to me, I'm still scared of the inevitable. Like Jonathan Taylor will eventually be the guy, but I'm not sure how quickly that's coming. So while Moss is a sell high for me right now, just based on the fact that I could get back a lot for him, I'm inclined to actually hold him right now.
That's fair. I think that
Yeah.
a really solid option who could stay that way for the rest of the season, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, even last week where he didn't seem, or in week 7, I should say, the prior week, where it didn't seem like he did a ton in from the fantasy points, he still had 18 carries. And so I think he's still going to get a lot of work, and therefore he's worth putting in your lineup because if he gets in the end zone, then it's a successful week, I think. And yeah, moving forward, I think it's going to be by committee. Eventually, yes, the inevitable will come and Jonathan Taylor will take over, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be now or next season or what. So that's why I'm inclined to hold because it's so known, and why not? The running back position has been so inconsistent across the board that if you have a guy who's getting that kind of work, then keep him on your roster.
Yeah, agreed with you, Brett. And looking at Carolina quickly, like it's just gonna end up being Adam Thielen because he's Adam Thielen. He's that guy. So keep starting him because he's gonna get so many targets every week. And I think looking at the running back room, it's weird, Brett. They've switched things up.
Very.
Like Chuba Hubbard is the guy now in the running game. Like Miles Sanders, we were like, oh my God, they paid money to Miles Sanders. Like he's gonna be the guy. And then Chuba Hubbard had a couple of great games when Miles Sanders was out. And now it's Chuba Hubbard. So, I mean, ride with Chuba Hubbard if you have him because he's going to end up being he's the number one guy. And Indianapolis's defense is okay. Like, I think they're middle of the pack when it comes to going against the running game. So, I mean, of course, if you have Chuba Hubbard, then ride with him. Like, I think that's probably just the option right now to go with that in that running game.
Yeah, I think that if you're a Miles Sanders owner, like, yeah, you were disappointed, but he was coming back from injury. It was a shoulder injury. He only played 12 snaps on offense, and so Hubbard 40 snaps. So yeah, he got the work, and Sanders rushed twice. He got no yards on either one, stuffed at the line. So yeah, obviously you can't start Sanders now, knowing that they're going with Chuba. They're riding the hot hand. Eventually they'll get healthier with Miles Sanders, and so it'll go back to normal. So I'm actually a little scared right now because I don't know how healthy Miles Sanders is, and he could be very well healthy. He could very well be healthy this week, and we don't know that yet. He's not carrying any injury designation heading into this game, and so will he get the work? I don't know. So I don't know. You really can be confident in starting either guy, but you're happy if you have Chuba Hubbard, obviously.
Yeah, and I think you're just holding on Sanders right now till you find out really this week what's going to be the workload and the share.
Yeah, completely. And I would just say that, if you're in one of those leagues where you're in a bye week bind and you need somebody at running back, then yeah, you could start Chuba Hubbard, but at the same time, like there is a lot of risk there just based on the fact that the injury designation went away.
Yeah, I completely agree there.
All right, so jumping to our next matchup here, the New York Giants as they travel to Las Vegas. Obviously, we saw the coaches, the general manager, the coordinators all let go in Las Vegas in the last 24 hours. The New York Giants take what has to be one of the worst losses in the history of football, throwing for -9 yards in the game last week against the New York Jets, missing a field goal that would have sealed the deal, letting the Jets march down the field. They lose overtime. They then go trade Leonard Williams to the Seattle Seahawks in the trade deadline yesterday. Leonard Williams came out about an hour ago and said, I'm excited to now be on a winning team. kind of rubbing a little bit of salt in the wound there. This Giants offense is just, it's not a good situation. I'm kind of just staying away from everyone except for Saquon Barkley. I think that Saquon is the only highlight of the whole thing. He had 36 carries, 128 yards, didn't get into the end zone, but nobody did last week, and so it didn't really matter. Tommy DeVito got into the end zone last week on a rush, and so no one got in. Darren Waller, he got hurt, so I would say at least monitor the status of his hamstring injury, but it could be weeks, if not days, was the report that came out of the local the beat writers over there. And so we might not have Darren Waller this week. I'm only riding with Saquon.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to end up having Darren Waller this week, Brett. I think right now it's Saquon. I spoke about it earlier in the week on my radio show, Brett. Like, I think we might be in a situation where if Saquon is getting this heavy of a workload, like, they could shut him down. Like, they really could. They are that bad right now that we could end up being in that situation where, of course, looking at it, like, yeah, the Giants are the ones that didn't give him a contract. Like, they gave him one in the end, but they didn't give him a long term. So it would be weird for them to shut him down. But if Saquon is getting 36 carries, Brett, we're talking about a guy who is injury prone for a lot of his career so far. He's not going to want that big of a workload. Like, that's not fair on him, I don't feel. And I feel like we could be in that situation soon. Of course, you're going to keep starting Saquon Barkley. If you can try and trade Saquon Barkley right now, could be an option. I think it could be a option if you could get some guy who's like equally as good as him. Like, I feel like that's going to be maybe something to look at. Of course, with Vegas, everything's gone to everything. Like, I feel like just looking at it, Jacobs and Adams are the two guys. Myers was terrible last week. Had one catch for 19 yards, and that was not great. Of course, like, now they're relying on different quarterbacks. They're moving around. Like, it's crazy there. I think Adams and Jacobs in the end are the two guys you rely on.
Zach, every year it comes to the middle of the season where there's one of these teams that's like, oh, hell breaks loose. And that's this team right here. This is actually my favorite thing to do each year is take one of these teams and do a Madden franchise with them. Just start it at week 8, week 9. This is going to be my team because you're basically looking at what could end up being a complete rebuild. They're probably going to get Davante Adams out of there because he doesn't want to stay there. Look at the New York Jets, one of those kind of teams to go out and try to get him. Obviously, like the Aaron Rodgers connection, like the light bulb went off immediately watching Davante the other night slam his helmet down and right in front of one of the trainers, and we saw her face. She kind of just tried to look away, kind of viral online, but sky is falling. Listen, the Josh Jacobs situation with the contract, I think that's a bit of a head scratcher now when you look at how they've utilized him, and he hasn't they haven't been efficient as an entire offense. Plain and simple, they're relying on Josh Jacobs to do it all, and Josh Jacobs from a fantasy football perspective, you're fine. If you have Josh Jacobs, you're starting him each and every week. No, this is not about that. This is more so about from the dynasty perspective. If you have any of these guys, like, don't expect them to be on this team next year. They very well could go out and pay Josh Jacobs his money and try to build it around him. I am not expecting Davante Adams on their team. Aiden O'Connell got named the starter earlier today. So all of a sudden, Jimmy Garoppolo, like, this is part of what GM got fired. The GM basically went out. He had Derek Carr. It was a guy who, yes, we just spoke about him a while ago. It's a guy who, he had a franchise quarterback. Didn't matter how many bad games he had. He basically said, okay, we don't want you anymore. He had a chance to go out and get Aaron Rodgers. Obviously he brought in Davante Adams because of Derek Carr. Davante is like, hey, I want Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is like, hey, I want to play with Davante. That would be cool. Deal got close, but all of a sudden, like, it blew up. They couldn't get the deal done. Aaron decides he doesn't want to go. Instead, they go and they decide on a guy who has had concussion issues, a ripped up shoulder. They couldn't even guarantee the money in Jimmy Garoppolo's contract. This is the reason why the GM got fired. So as far as it goes with dynasty perspective, you probably can even buy low right now on Devontae. And the reason is because I don't think he's going to be there next year. And his age is getting up there. I think that they're going to build this team around Josh Jacobs and Michael Mayer. I think Michael Mayer has obviously not gotten the workload. It's kind of just been Austin Hooper for the most part. I think that as the season goes on, they're going to put Michael Mayer in the position right now to succeed. It is a guy that is not owned in anything. He's about 95% of leagues. If you have him, if you're in one of those deeper leagues, definitely a guy to keep on the radar as we start to head into the new era of the Las Vegas Raiders. And there you go. There's my angry rant on Las Vegas, but they will be my Madden franchise for this season.
There you go. I agree. Let's get to our next one, Brett.
That was a lot there. So jumping right now over to Dallas at Philadelphia. And Zach, I mean, it's pretty simple. Start your guys. There's one game this week where there's one game every single week where I think we can just say start your guys. This is one of those games. I think that this is going to be listen, it's low scoring all the time, but this could also be a shootout because these two offenses are just really good. Obviously, Dallas coming off a really good week they had against the Rams. Philadelphia, also same thing, coming off a really good week. Obviously, A.J. Brown now being claimed as one of the top receivers in the entire world. And, he is plain and simple. Like, the talent is there. He goes out and he just plucks the ball out of the air like we were talking about with D-Hop. Like, you can put anybody on him. He's going to go up there and get the ball, which just makes him so special. And, it makes it a little sad for the fact that they traded him away for Treylon Burks over there in Tennessee, who obviously has not panned out. But doesn't matter. As far as the Philadelphia Eagles go, start your guys as well for Dallas.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. And of course, Hurts, Swift, the two receivers, Smith and Brown, and then of course Goddard. And then on the other side, you're starting Pollard. Dak, I said it's going to be a little bit of a tough one here. So you may want to stay away from him. It's in Philly. That's the difference for me. And of course, the other guys in this offense with Lamb as well as Jake Ferguson, a solid option heading into this week.
Yep. So now we jump into the next one, and it is Sunday Night Football. And it will be a rematch of the Damar Hamlin game from the very end of last season. Buffalo, as they travel into Cincinnati. And Zach, this is sure to be one. Let's first start here with the Bills. Seems like Gabe Davis had another great game for what it's worth. Obviously, they were playing Tampa Bay, and so we were expecting a high output as far as the offense goes. They only put 24 points up on the board, but it seemed like Diggs and Gabe Davis were the focal point of the offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. And they kind of just went away from that running game. I think they're going to need to end up doing that again because they're going up against Cincinnati, who's locked in right now. Like we've talked about this team, like they struggled early, and that's happened in the past. They are ready to go. Like they're back to AFC championship contender, Super Bowl contender, Cincinnati Bengals. They're back to it. So I feel like with that being said, you're going to start your guys. You're feeling more confident about T. Higgins after last week too. That's another thing. I feel like that's big right now for Cincinnati. Buffalo, I'd lower expectations on James Cook in this game, especially because I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. That's the biggest thing right now. Kincaid, you picked them last week. Really solid game. Think they're going to be throwing the ball to him once again in this one, Brett.
I agree. I think that, again, with the Gabe Davis situation, he had 12 targets, 9 catches, 87 yards, a touchdown. I think that you probably got to start him because, listen, this was at the hot end. And so, yeah, we don't know when Gabe Davis is going to have a great game or not a great game. The previous week, he had 1 catch for 6 yards. So I think you got to ride the hot hand right now and play him. I agree with you as far as the running backs go. The situation with James Cook, it's a lot of uncertainty right now, especially they bring in Leonard Fournette as a free agent. And so, a lot of eyebrows got raised there as far as, is James Cook going to really get the bulk of the work? Are they going to bring Leonard Fournette up to speed? Or is it really just the fact that Latavius Murray has been very inefficient. Fire for 7 yards last week, and I believe it was about the same the week prior to that. So what is the situation at running back? It leads to this big question mark. There's a lot of James Cook's owners that are concerned out there. He's a very buy low candidate right now, I would say, in Dynasty, and a guy you should at least go look at. He's very young and obviously still a lot of talent there. But again, it's about that panic. Guys can go check in on him. But yeah, you're starting your other guys. Dalton Kincaid, I love Dalton Kincaid. He's still available in 20% of leagues. And again, I'm not really sure how. That's a guy who I think is going to be one of the focal points of this offense moving forward for years to come.
Yeah, definitely, Brett. Cincinnati, like I said, you're starting your guys there with Burrow, of course, Mixon, Chase, Higgins. Boyd is a guy to look at this week because Buffalo hasn't been great against wide receivers, and I think it's a good matchup for Boyd.
Yeah, I also think that, as far as the slot receiver goes, I think that they've been very banged up, the Bills defense. And so it's an opportunity where he can get open over the middle. I think that's a good candidate again for this week. But let's just jump right now to the last matchup of the week. The LA Chargers, they travel to play the New York Jets Monday Night Football. And Zach, let's just start with the Jets right now because, listen, Garrett Wilson was coming into the season going to be a all-world wide receiver. Obviously, his talent shows that he can be that. His workload, it's actually going to come quite a bit a ways away from where it was in week 1. He had 13 targets last week, had 100 yards finally, have a catch. And so, yeah, he didn't get it in the end zone, but are you confident in him moving forward?
Yeah, I am. I think the biggest thing was you needed to see it with Zach Wilson, that chemistry, that like how they would work together. Of course, they did so last year, but of course Wilson was bad last year, and they needed to figure that out. Now we're kind of back into a groove where Wilson's starting to feel comfortable. Zach Wilson, that is, and Garrett Wilson, yeah, he's the top wide receiver clearly. So that's I think season long now you're more confident as weeks go on between that relationship of Zach Wilson and Garrett Wilson. And I think, Brett, like the only other guy is Breece Hall. Like that's who you're starting right now. Of course, Wilson is a super flex option right now. I think that's stood pat the last couple of weeks. And he's getting a solid matchup against the Chargers this week. And yeah, their defense was great last week, but they were playing Chicago. I think the Jets will figure this defense out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, other than that, it's not a very attractive team to be starting. And obviously it's just those 3 guys. The defense, obviously, you're not starting them this week because they're going up against the Chargers. So it's not a great matchup for them. But obviously if you have them, you're picking up another defense and keeping the Jets because you're not getting rid of them.
Very true. And Brett, for the Chargers, it's Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler. Of course, Keenan Allen. I think Josh Palmer's put himself on the radar. And I'll say if Gerald Everett's healthy, then you're putting him maybe as a flex option in your lineup. It's a good matchup, of course, against the Jets.
Yeah, I agree. I think all the same guys are going in. The other thing is I would actually look Cameron Dicker because I think the Jets have done a really good job of stopping the red zone. I think you're going to have there's a lot of opportunities for him this week because the Jets have been a really good red zone defense, which obviously will lead to some more field goals. So Cameron Dicker, obviously it's one of those weeks where you're back into the buys and you might need a kicker. Dicker, the kicker, can't go wrong with him. But I agree on all fronts. Let's go to our lock of the week. And obviously, last week you took Roschon Johnson to my Josh Palmer. I don't actually know your pick, and you don't actually know my pick. And so we're doing this kind of on the fly. But let's hear what you have as you've gone up 4-2 in the standings. Who are you picking?
I'm a little worried, Brett, that I maybe have taken your guy. I don't know. I'm taking one of your favorites, and it's Michael Thomas. It's Michael Thomas. There you go. So it's Michael Thomas. He's going up against Chicago. It's a perfect matchup. And I am on the Chris Olave hate wagon now. So it's just, I think Michael Thomas is going to have a big week. Sorry if I did take your pick. I think I did. Yeah, it's going to be Michael Thomas for me. Sorry.
Well, I'm going to the well because I have up here. I'm taking Jordan Addison. And the reason is because I really do think that this is going to be one of those weeks, like we spoke about before, where they try to force feed him to try to get him open in short yardage, get a guy like Jaron Hall comfortable throwing to guys. Obviously, yes, Hawkinson's going to be there. I think that they're going to try to double Hawkinson as much as they possibly can. But I think that the target share for Addison, I mean, this could be a week where he gets like a Jefferson level target share here.
Yeah, it could be. And of course, the quarterback situation is still like a question. And I think with Jaron Hall, he definitely could have a big week.
So now we jump over to the other side. It is our ones to watch. These are guys that are going to be being a target next week. Last week, I took Dalton Kincaid, and that paid off very handsomely for me. Zach, you went and you took Kendrick Bourne, who still finished with a nice turnout. Obviously, he tore his ACL during the game, so hopefully whoever you pick this week stays healthy throughout. I'm going with Trey McBride. Not straying too far away from the tight ends. Trey McBride, to me, is my pick. I think that he's a back-end tight end one with the potential that he can go higher. Obviously, this week it sounds like Clayton Tune is going to be the starter. And I think that they're just going to kind of get back to what they were doing here. Obviously, if it's Kyler Murray, then it becomes a different story. I'm expecting it to be Clayton Tune. Even if it's Kyler Murray, listen, Trey McBride was really, really and got a lot of workload from him. So that's my pick. Right now, it seems that he is available in 75% of leagues, 75.3% of ESPN standard leagues. And so, yeah, taking him.
Yeah, Brett, I'm going to agree with you with the tight ends this week. I'm actually taking my one to watch is Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett. I think if he plays, he's going to go up against a Jets defense who struggled against tight ends so far this year. And then he gets another great matchup next week. And I think that could put him on the radar. We've been looking for tight ends. Gerald Everett has been a guy who's struggled with injury so far this year. But once he gets rolling, like he is one of Herbert's top targets year after year. So I feel like that can definitely him a matchup against the Jets this week.
Yep, and he is also available in 74% of leagues, and so again, it's one of those guys that, obviously he gets into the end zone a lot. He's very reliable, and so I think as far as it goes with both of those picks, I'm just going to score a touchdown this week. It's just kind of about who it is, but yeah, listen, Trey McBride. I'm taking him more from the volume standpoint. Totally understand you wanting to take a guy like Gerald Everett, a guy who can get into the end zone. But that'll do it here from us. Zach, any last words here before we head into what is going to be another exciting week of football?
Happy November. Hopefully, Chris Olave, please turn it around.
All right, the pleas are in for Chris Olave. The thumbs up and subscribe to us on YouTube wherever you get your podcast. And in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the dawn. We shall rise yet again. Next week here on the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. For Zach Malman, I'm Brett Malman. Take care, everyone.